Welcome to Women in the Arena podcast, the podcast celebrating women doing extraordinary things in plain sight. I'm your host, Audra Egan, and our mission is to elevate the value, strength, and resilience each woman brings to the world. Without further delay, let's go ahead and start the show.
Oh, snaps, it's me again. Knock, knock, that swag is in. So fly, yeah, I'm a 10. Turn heads whenever I'm passing by. Look around, bringing the heat.
Welcome in, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me again this week. This week, I am joined by this amazing, incredible powerhouse of a woman. This week, I'm joined by Kerryn Vaughan, and she's an international speaker, author, facilitator, and fellow podcast host. She is also the author of an award-winning book, Magnificent Kids, which was the catalyst to her founding the global organization of One Planet Classrooms, which facilitates such projects as clean water solutions and student sponsorships programs for communities in Africa. She also helped launch the Girls with Hammers, which hosts conferences and workshops that's aimed at empowering and connecting women. And she also has a second book, Get Off the Bench, which helps people bring their ideas to life. It is my pleasure and my honor to introduce to you Kerryn. Kerryn, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
No, thank you very much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Wonderful.
Well, thank you for being here. As people might have detected, you are not from Brooklyn. You are obviously from the other side of the planet. Will you tell us where you are from, Kerryn?
I'm from Australia and down the bottom near Melbourne, 3 hours east of Melbourne in Gippsland. And so technically we're like ahead of you. So right now, I don't know, it's nighttime for you or something, and it's 8 o'clock in the morning for me. So I can tell you that Wednesday is a beautiful day. How's that?
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you for letting us know that Wednesday is a beautiful day. It is Tuesday evening here on the West Coast here in the U.S. So I look forward to Wednesday being a great day. So thank you for letting us know that. And
my pleasure.
Today, we're going to talk about all the amazing things that you have done with your life and with your energies and what inspired you to do that. And your life didn't start out that way. You were a wild rock and roll star.
I was living the rock and roll life and thought it was all about me. And clearly it was all about me back then. But I think that was all I was focused on. And I don't think I'd really, other than my grandma passing away with cancer, when I was 21, I don't think I'd really had much trauma or much, losing anybody close. And then my sister I was actually playing a gig and my middle sister rang me and said that the next one down, so the fourth girl, 5 girls in our family, my poor father, but anyway, he reminds us of that often. And the fourth one was diagnosed with breast cancer. And it really shocked me because I couldn't. And to be honest, I was probably not emotionally intelligent at all and hadn't really lived other than had some good street smarts. But I could only see the D word for death, and I couldn't actually even comprehend that she could survive. And anyway, I'll try and keep this short because it's a very, very, very thorough story. I tried to save her. Like, I'm the oldest in the family, and I sort of went on this mission to save her life. And, I even employed a witch doctor and all sorts of things. But she came we had a family holiday in Hawaii 20 years before this. And, the whole family agreed. We just love Hawaii. And I was going over with my partner, and my sister said, I want to come. And we said, are you okay? She said, yeah, I'm cured. I'm healed, everything else. But she had a brain hemorrhage on the plane over, which we didn't know that's what it was. When we got off, she said, I've got a headache. And then we were wandering around Waikiki and she was sort of stumbling and sick and vomiting. And I kept saying, you got to go to a doctor. Like, this isn't right. And she kept saying, no, I'm good. I'll be good. And about a week into it, I absolutely cracked it and said, that's it. I can't do this anymore. Yeah, you're going to the hospital. And so I took her to the hospital, and she'd had a major brain bleed. And I have no idea how she was even walking. Well, she wasn't walking by this stage. You know, she was just not in a good state, but refusing to go to the hospital. Anyway, so and then they had to do life-saving surgery, and they opened up her brain and said it's full of tumours and we'll have to close it back up, and she'll die here. And so there was a lot of, all my family flew over, and we had to make some really heartbreaking decisions, you know, about how to deal with that. But finally, we with the Australian Embassy on board, we got her back to Australia, and she lived a couple more months, you know, but she did make it back to her hometown, and you know that was all she wanted, to come back to Warragul, which is a little rural town in Victoria. But after she died, it was, you know, I guess back then I wasn't that young. I was 39, and I probably should have been a bit more grown up and a bit more mature. But I was still operating in that space of I've got to be tough, I've got to be strong, I can't show emotion, you know, that's weakness, and I'm the oldest in the family. And it was, when I look back now, I just think, oh man, how I wish I knew what I knew now back then. And so I ended up quitting my job in the city and came back to work in a nursery. And I thought a nursery over here is where we grow plants, and not a baby nursery. And I thought, oh, I'll just hide behind the plants. You know, I can have my own little private little grief party, and nobody will see me. But that ended up disaster. That was disastrous. The owners of the nursery are absolute, just pricks, you know, yelling at everybody. And I ended up locking the boss in the shed, and, you know, so somebody let her out. You know, I saw her a few days later, she was out. See, the dogs love that story.
They do. I love the story.
And, yeah, so that, and just, I'll let you ask some questions in a minute, but I'll just quickly, you know, say that I kind of felt lost and didn't really know, you know, I felt like a failure, to be honest, because as the older sister, I'm supposed to save. Well, it's not the truth, but in my head, you know, I should have been able to save her. I didn't. I failed. And the rest of the people in the town, our family is very well known in the town, and people in the town sort of, we had Relay for Life coming to Warragul, and that, I don't know if you have it over there, but it's like an overnight event where you walk around a track and raise money for the Cancer Council and all that. And so it was coming to Warragul.
Life. We have that. Yes, we sure do.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. Yes. So a few people in the town said to me, why don't you come and join the committee? And, you know, I think they thought that was a great way for me to honour my sister, you know, to take part in something cancer related. And anyway, I took on multiple roles. I don't know why, but, you know, I just took it all on, not knowing what I was doing. And so there was entertainment coordinator, very easy for me. Ceremony coordinator, very easy. Activities, all of these things I already knew back to front. But it was a massive success. And what I was on that stage on the last day, and we were, you know, saying how much we'd raised. It was like, I don't remember now, but something like 110,000 or something. It was the very first one. It was a really good fundraising thing. And I was getting praise for doing good for others. Doing. Well, I didn't want the praise, but it was at that point that I realised I had the power. You know, I had this incredible power within me to make a difference to other people's lives. And I had not noticed that before. You know, I had not, other than, I guess, every time I was on stage and I was making people happy, but I was selfishly doing it for me more than them, you know. And when I realised, wow, look what I've done, and look how many lives this has impacted, and potentially look how many lives this has saved. It was a real turning point for me. So then that was the turning point. Took me 11 years before I wrote my first book. 11 years of searching and seeking, and what is it? I want to do? How do I help more people? How do I get that feeling again? So now I'll stop there so you can ask something, but that's basically the turning point.
So it was 11 years from the time that your sister died to when that spark hit that you're like, oh, I think I know what I need to do now.
Yeah, and it was
So it was that 11 years of searching and being a little lost as to now what, because your sister's life had that much of impact on you, of that loss, that void that she had left in your family, especially you being the oldest. You put all that responsibility on yourself of, I should have been able to fix this.
And shouldn't have put that,
Right.
Yeah, that's right. I think that in that 11 years, it kind of sounds like I was wandering around aimlessly. I wasn't. I was busy, but I couldn't put my finger on it, But one thing I did do is when I was 10, my dad was in the Lions Club and we took a bus full of people with disabilities down to a fun park in the city. And I remember we stopped at a park and I was kicking a footy with a young guy with Down syndrome. And I loved it. And this is when I was 10. I loved it. And I always had in my mind I want to work with people with disabilities, but I never did it. Just life took me in other directions. And probably I was just being too selfish to do it, to be honest. But then when all this happened and after I left the nursery, I just quit everything and thought, you know what? I'm going back to learn how to work with people with disabilities. So I did my Certificate 4 in disability work. And after the 2 years, the teacher asked me, do you want to come and teach with me? She said, I'm really taken by the level of kindness that you're showing in the role plays, and I think you'd be a great teacher. And so I did. I started that, and then her and I started doing autism and behaviour specialist work, going into schools and training disability services and that kind of thing. And I became a behaviour specialist, and then I left the teaching and went to do that in an organisation, Department of Human Services. You'll have something similar to that over there, and found that was really not as much integrity in there as I thought there might be or hoped there might be, and so I ended up going out on my own. But when I was in teaching and I would go to some of the schools, the teachers would say to me, fix these kids. There's something really wrong with them. And I used to say, the kids are not broken. The system's broken. We're getting it wrong. And Magnificent Kids, which is the first book I wrote when I was 50, so 11 years later, is not about kids with autism, even though there are a couple of kids in there with autism. It was the fact that I started to get a bit peeved at, why aren't we listening to kids? I could hear kids having great ideas, and they didn't have a lid. They didn't have this limiting belief system, that says I can't do that. Like us adults, we're professionals at that. And I thought, we're not listening to kids, and they've got some great ideas. And so that was the spark that thought, I'm going to do something about this. I'm actually going to showcase some of these kids. So I wrote the book, and that's where I started.
Tell us a little bit. Tell us a little bit about some of these kids that you highlighted in Magnificent Kids, because you shared with me a little bit about some of these kids, and I was just amazed and in awe with what some of these kids have done that are quote unquote disabled, which they put me to shame and many of the adults that I know to shame, because these kids are quite accomplished, and I don't care how you label them. These kids are amazing. So share with us what some of these kids have done.
Right. Well, first of all, I will say that the kids don't have disabilities. So these are just ordinary kids that are, out there doing magnificent things. However, saying that, and I've got the book in front of me so that I can make sure that I actually tell you a few things, but there is one boy in there who is in a wheelchair, and I'm going to actually find it, because so he used to love Steve Irwin. Now, I don't know if you guys have heard, you would have crocodile, Steve Irwin, he'd chase crocodiles. Yeah.
Yes.
And so he was in love with him. Like, he used to watch all his shows and everything else. And then he got, stung in the heart with a stingray barb. And Daniel went to his mum and said, distraught, who's going to save them now? And she said, I don't know. And he's got cerebral palsy. He's in a wheelchair. And he said, well, I'll have to. And his mum was like, okay, whatever you want to do. So the support was there. So that's Daniel Clark. So that's just one person. And he ended up with his brother going to Borneo and Sumatra and all that, and doing treks through the jungle. They've purchased so many acres of land for the orangutans and that kind, like some amazing work they've done, written a book and just great stuff. I've got this list. It's just amazing. Carter and Olivia Reese, they were 7 and 8 and they started advocating for animals, wild animals, and they've been to Vietnam arguing with the government about rhino horns. They've sent boxes of hair and fingernails to the Chinese government saying, this is what we stop poaching rhino horn. This is what it's made of. If you want hair and fingernails, here's a box. They got arrested in when they were 10 and 12 for protesting in Dallas about a black rhino auction. It's stuff that you and I would be too scared to do. Like, we were kind of
Absolutely
go and do that. And it's Jack Andraker is another one. He was 15 and his family friend died of pancreatic cancer. And to get pancreatic tests, they're not very accurate, not always accurate. He had 100 knockbacks, actually, till the 100th lab said to him, yeah, you can come and have a play in here and see what you can work out. He developed a little test strip to test for pancreatic cancer. And it was way, way, way more accurate than anything on the market. And it costs like 2 cents for this strip, and all these others cost a fortune, and was almost prohibitive for a few people. And the list goes on. Like, it's just Jordan. Who else? Well, I don't know. Jordan Shara. She was just doing, not just doing, like, collecting pills because they were going into the rivers, and had all these pill collection places. Dallas Jessup. She was. Someone got raped at her college, so she started up a self-defense classes for women, just yell fire, teaching women to just yell fire and scream, and Avalon Tyson, she was 7, she had a TV station. Like, I could just go on and on and on, and there's just so many amazing kids in here, but all of them doing world-changing projects, in before the age of 18, some of them 7 and 8, and there's 23 of them that I've featured here, and there's thousands of kids in the world doing just sensational things. This was in 2014, so they're all now young adults. I still stay in touch with quite a lot of them. They're just it made me realise that if I'm 50 and these kids are 7, 8, 9, 10, what could I have done? And it's not living a life of regret, but it's living a life of, holy hell, you better get started. You better pull your finger out and do something. So, yeah, that's the story behind that.
And that led to One Planet Classroom. And what was the work that you did with One Planet Classroom?
Yeah, so I had a book launch, and a guy in Africa saw the book, saw a pitch photo of me with a friend of his. He said, how do I get my hands on a book? So I said, I'll send one over to you. Then he said, I want to start a magnificent class. And I said, that's great. Why don't we get, because and he wanted to Skype. He said, will you Skype with my class? Yeah, I'll do that. Then I said, what about if I get one of the kids in the book to Skype with your class? That's even better. Like, they talk to them. And he's like, oh yeah, that's fantastic. Then I said, and your listeners won't know this about me, but they'll know it as soon as I say it, and it'll all make sense. I jump in without thinking, just because that's what you do. And always fail. I have so many failures under my belt, but I think it's wonderful. And I said, well, why don't I get a class in Australia to Skype with your class? So you do this pen pal thing. This was when Skype was really big, but very unreliable. It's kind of like hit and miss. Will it work? And a few things transpired, and I ended up in a few weeks having 45 schools in Africa registered to do this program. And what I realized is I didn't have any laptops. I'm like, well, how are they going to do that? They're all saying, but we don't have laptops. I was, oh, God. So I've put a call out on Facebook. Does anyone have a laptop? I want to send it to Africa. Next thing I've got 30. So 3 times 10. And I'm like, oh, my God, what am I going to do with all these laptops? What am I going to do? So I go to the post office and they say it's going to cost you $600 to send them because of the lithium batteries each. And I'm like, hell, that's $18,000. I'm not going to be able to do that. Now I've got all these laptops. I don't know what to do with them. But I thought I'm going to start a business. I'll just start because I don't know what else to do. I'll just start One Planet Classrooms and figure it out. Anyway, it took us months and months and months and months to send these laptops over to Uganda. They had to go through Kenya into Uganda, but I failed significantly because in all those months, I never stopped to question the time zones, never stopped to think, hey, wait a minute, the kids in Africa are not in school at the same time as the kids in Australia. It's never going to work. And not only that, I sent laptops to a country where 95% of them don't even have power. So another disaster. It's kind of like this is great. Well, what they could do, they could drive it down to the marketplace and trickle feed it. Those pictures you see on the internet of 1,000 plugs on wires just hanging off one telegraph pole. Do you know? And everybody, that kind of power pole. And so it would just trickle feed all day. So they'd spend the whole day standing there guarding their laptop. It wasn't going to work. But anyway, what we realised is if we put solar systems into the schools, then they could charge their laptops. And initially that was the idea. But what ended up happening, which was just profound, was that primary school goes to P7, level 7, and then if you don't pass, you can't go to high school. Now, for the girls, that's really significant because if you don't pass P7, you're going to get married off, and you might only be 10, 11, 12, and you are going to get married off because there's no other option for you. And we're not talking about kind marriages to a 15-year-old boy and, like a nice little romance. It's not like that. It's really, really awful to older men that are incredibly abusive. And so the girls are desperate to pass. So the solar system provided them the opportunity that they could sleep at the school for 2 or 3 weeks when exam time was happening and actually pass. So it was the solar systems were life-saving. And when I say life-saving, I mean that. The abuse often ends in murder and stuff like that. But also another reason the girls weren't progressing or passing is because they're the ones that had to go fetch the water. And so they would have to go miles with a big jerry can. Some of the kids are as young as 3, like off fetching water from these dirty, stagnant ponds, that men were peeing in and animals were toileting in and just full of worms, just disgusting. And some of the kids were dying from that, as drinking that sort of water as well. But the girls were doing this, and while they were doing that, they couldn't stay in school. They couldn't be in school to learn, so they failed again. So there's a lot of barriers for girls. And I'm going to be honest, I had a real white man's view before I started doing that. It was kind of like, the poor people in Africa, and it's. I don't know. I just had a really naive view of what might go on, and pictures of Sudan, where it's dry and there's no food, and I just thought the whole of Africa was like that. And I don't know. I had this very naive view of just that one little thing I could do could save the world, and I soon got sat on my bum, that's not exactly right. And I soon learned about the girls' issues that I did not know about. Also, while girls have got their period, they can't be in school. So in some places they have to sit over a hole for a week and just out in the open, just sit in a bloody hole. And so while they go to get water, along the way, there's these men that are like boater drivers there, so they're taxi drivers on motorbikes, and they trade sex, for sanitary items for the older girls, or they rape the younger ones, or they just rape anyone. And it's kind of like, wow, wow, this is just horrendous. And so the solution to that was to start putting in water tanks into schools so that the girls didn't have to go and do that. And so we started putting in water tanks and water wells, connecting clean water to villages, that kind of stuff. It wasn't very expensive, maybe $2,000 for each one. And there's not a water shortage in Uganda. This is where we do most of our work. It's not a water shortage. There's an infrastructure shortage. They're not able to catch the water. But yeah. And we started doing a sponsorship program. So that happened by fluke. One of the school heads of one of the schools sent a photo of me, this little boy lying on the oval with a water bottle. I said, "What's he doing?" She said, "Oh, he's hanging around waiting for scraps." And I said, "What?" I said, what do you mean he's hanging around waiting for scraps? And she's like, "Well, after we feed our kids, they hang around and they beg, to see if there's any for them." I said, "Oh my God, this is terrible," And she said, "He's gone now." And I said, "Oh, go and find him. I want to go and find him, see what he's doing." Anyway, she found him in a church, and what had happened was he came from up in the hills with a sister and a brother and a mother and a grandmother, but the husband, so his dad, had gone off to look for work, and the dad's brother came to the house and told the mother she had to marry him, and she said, "No, I'm not going to marry you. I'm married to your brother." And so then he arranged murderers came back to kill her. A few days later, and she ran off with the youngest one, which was the kid. His name's Grateful. His name is, and they were hiding in a church down in the I don't know, in the town, but hiding under the pews, under the seats in a church. And yeah, so I said, "Right, get that kid, put him in a school, and I'm gonna sponsor him. I'm going to make sure he's got an education." And so we did that. And the woman runs a school, went up to the village and got all the women together and said, "No, we all stick together. The women, don't let this happen to anybody else." And yeah, and so then we started a sponsorship program. We had at our peak about 180 kids, boys and girls, and we transferred some to that school for another organisation to manage, and I've only just given it up last year or this year. I decided I can't continue. It was 8 years of it, and for a number of reasons, and health reasons sitting underneath there as well. Like there's only so much you can give until you're burnt out from compassion fatigue, and it was a hard decision, and I had a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of guilt, a lot of conflict and everything else, but I've got to keep reminding myself that I did 8 years of it, and in that would have saved many lives and, made a lot of change. And sometimes you've got to be okay with letting things go even if it hurts. So that's the story of One Planet Classrooms.
But you say it's a failure. I think that it was remarkable, even though it was not as you planned, even though that it started out as this great idea of I'll just teach my class in Australia to your class in Africa. It became I'll get you power, I'll get you water, I'll protect the women in the villages, and I'll make sure all the kids have education. That was amazing success. That was not a failure by a long shot. So,
no, I know.
Like I said,
no. I always say that it was a failure. It was a failure to start with, and I always tell this story when I'm doing keynotes. About failures are fantastic, because when we call them failures, but if we actually have a look, it's actually it's feedback. Failure is feedback. It gives us information, to make other decisions and to do it differently. And so, no, I don't see it as failure as in the end result. That's massive success. But if it wasn't a failure in the first place, I wouldn't have done this. And the other thing I want to say is too that often we have failures and we get ashamed of them. We get embarrassed, and we feel like people are judging us and what have you. Oh, what an idiot, you failed. And we run with our tail between our legs and we do nothing. And I think there's a lot more power in standing up and saying, oh my God, I really screwed that up. But you know what? I can fix it and I can do it way better. And I think that's important.
I would agree. So your next venture was Girls with Hammers. Tell us about Girls with Hammers. I mean, this is, I love this because I know that the term is girls, but it's not just girls. It's women, and it's bringing women together to bring the best of everything out in each other and what's possible.
Absolutely. It's I started, as I said before, I didn't even realize this girl issue happened in Africa. Really naive life, but I started to really think about it and think, God, and I was oblivious to the gender gap. I really was, because I'm a tomboy. I could have anything I want, anything boys could do, I could do. I never saw the gap. Does that make sense? Because I was living proof that it didn't exist in my mind. But I started to become really aware of it and thought, geez, this isn't good, And I was sitting outside of a workwear shop. So, they sell tradie clothes and all that kind of stuff, flannelette shirts. And I looked up and I thought, wow, I'm going to start something called Girls with Hammers, because I think girls should know that they can be whatever they want. And I was particularly aiming it at, teenage girls, like that. None of this taking photos of your boobs and sending them to boys and that kind of crap, and living this sort of submissive stereotype that I've got to sexualize myself to be accepted, a lot of bullshit. So I was like, I'm going to start something up and I'm going to tell girls they don't need to do this, and everything else. So nothing to do with hammers, nothing to do with woodwork, but it's metaphoric, building stronger girls, stronger women. Yeah. And so I kind of left it because I had enough on my plate. But then I was about a year later, I was at a International Women's Day event. There were cards on the table, and I will stand up for women, I will stick up for women, I will do this. And I'm thinking, in my mind, they were a little insipid, because I thought, who's not doing this? Like, who's not speaking up anyway? But then I saw one that I loved, and I've got it up on my wall. It says, I will launch a purposeful female-focused initiative. I thought, oh, wow, there's a challenge. See, now this is this thing, me jumping in again, no thought. So I got up on stage in front of 300 women, waving this bloody card around. I'm going to do this. They're all cheering. I get down off the stage and thought, no, I've done it again. Now I've got to do something with this. And so I came home and told my partner, who said, well, why don't you just do Girls with Hammers? You've been talking about it, and it's a perfect opportunity. I said, well, if I'm doing it, you're doing it with me. So I decided to go into a couple of schools, talk about it. The girls in the schools were kind of like, oh, my God, who's this old fart telling us not to take pictures of our boobs, It's kind of like, again, another failure. This is perfect failure, because, that's not going to happen. The girls are not paying any attention to me, because they know best, and they're teenagers after all, so they know more than me, lived a lot longer. So I was like, damn, I don't know what to do. Then we're thinking we're going to do a tradie conference where all the girls could come and listen to trade speak, women who are in trade, electricians, builders, be inspired to do that. But then it ended up, we had a conference with just, and I'll say not just, but some wonderful speakers that were talking about empowerment messages. And we just put it out there. We just did the conference, opened it up, see who would come. But most of them were aged between 45 and 65. And there were a lot of outliers either side. And we're like, wow, we didn't see this coming. What we realized, they were coming for connection. They were coming because they felt stuck. They were coming because they felt alone. They felt like they're the only ones going through something. They didn't have the tools to get out of, to make their life better, to flourish, what have you. No, I'm not saying they were all had something wrong with their life. That's not what I'm saying at all. But every average woman, is often thinking a lot of these things. I'm this age, and what have I done? Who am I? And It was hugely successful. So this year we've got one coming up in 4 weeks, and it'll be our 6th. So 6 years of this, and we have amazing speakers, and there's prizes, and there's music, and there's lunch, and there's dancing, and it's a lot of connection. Great stories, really impactful. We experience every emotion that a human being can possibly possibly feel in one day. It's from laughing to crying to howling to squealing. So it's a fabulous, fabulous day. And the girls bit, we kept it. There are some people who say women don't want to be known as girls, and my partner and I, both female, we don't care about being called girls. We love being called girls. It's kind of it always sort of ignites your childlike playfulness. I think it's anyway. We're not going to change it for anybody, and but we also wanted the message to say to girls, you're a strong chick. Whatever you think, if you're a girl, you're going to be a woman. You are a woman. You're female. You're bloody strong. You're powerhouse. So live that powerhouse. So yeah, some people might say my message is incorrect, but whatever. It doesn't matter. We're doing great things. That's all that matters.
It also allows the invitation for the younger generation to, when they feel the inclination that they want to join you, they can, that they won't feel intimidated, that they'll be surrounded by a bunch of old ladies, which quite honestly, as you get older, you get a lot more fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm here to tell you that as you get older, you become way more fun than when you were younger, because you no longer care what anybody else thinks. It's when you suddenly start to really understand who you are, because you've raised your children. If you've had children, you've raised your children. They're already out of the house. You've built a career. Maybe you're building a second career, but you are suddenly now no longer asking permission as to who you have to be, who you want, or who you think you should be. Now you're becoming who you really are. And so there's no one cares anymore. No one cares what anybody else thinks. And that's when the fun begins.
Absolutely.
So the younger generation may come in and go, these women are a lot of fun.
Oh, absolutely. And we do. We also have youth tickets. So, like 13 to 17-year-olds, and we do get youth come in. It's changed, actually. We've had stories come back that the stories have changed their lives. One girl was 13 and gay, but still in the cupboard, and really sort of keeping it quiet. Only her mum knew. One of our speakers talked about, being the first declared gay female footballer in our AFL footy league, and it was this real role model moment for this girl. And then she said, I don't care anymore. I'm going to tell people now, and I don't care. And she said, I'm going to be who I am. And this was a 13-year-old, and it just changed everything. Like she was thinking she hated herself. She was thinking that she didn't know whether she wanted to live, that sort of stuff. And this one speaker just turned her around completely. So that's powerful, really powerful.
Yeah, when you are in a room full of people, women especially, when you become part of a community and you're embraced, you get welcome to be whoever you are.
Yeah.
And she finally felt permission to be who she was, and bravery to be who she was, who she truly, authentically was, which is magic. Magic
really
happens.
Magic. Yeah. And in that room, you're 100% right. There is no age. Like in that room, everyone's just everyone. Dear, we're just, it's just, everyone loves everyone. And it's just, wow. I couldn't be happier.
Well, I invite you to have this kind of event on this side of the pond.
Well, we would love
to.
Fun. We would love
that might
to.
Be fun. Come to this side of the planet and have some fun over here on this side.
And, well, we will if we can find people to help us. Yes.
Well, you I throw out the challenge. I just might, and I throw out that challenge because the audience is a remarkable audience. I have been very lucky and very fortunate that this is a very special audience, and they've been incredible to me. So I'm throwing out the offer, the challenge, and the request. Help us bring this type of event on U.S. soil. Help us out. Let's figure this out to bring this here, because I don't think that there's enough of these types of events here to help support each other. So let's figure it out. Let's do that. Let's figure it out and figure out how to bring it here. Because
Fantastic.
from Kerryn's life-changing event of I'm out of control, I couldn't fix this. She dedicated her entire life to what can I fix? Who can I help? That's an amazing thing. That's an incredible thing. And as before we got on air, what I mentioned to her, if we all did something that was a positive thing, and it doesn't have to be what Kerryn did, which is she's literally trying to change the world in whatever way, shape, or form she can. But if we all just put something positive out into the world every single day, can you imagine what the world would be like? It would certainly be a whole lot less stressful. I tell you that much.
Absolutely.
I mean,
and kind. Wow.
I know, an amazing feat what you have done. I mean, you've culminated your entire experience to throwing that very gauntlet out by your last book with writing Get Off the Bench. You challenged everybody by the very same thing, by telling everybody to do that. Tell everybody about your latest book, Get Off the Bench.
Well, it's not my latest, actually. I've also put out a gratitude journal called 100 Days of Gratitude.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
But
I misspoke, but yes. Tell us about Get Off the Bench. Then we'll talk about the gratitude journal.
No, that's all right. Get Off the Bench. It's funny because because of all the things I was doing, I started to get asked to speak at conferences and that kind of thing. And a local one, a friend of mine was running, and he said, do you want to run a workshop? I'm like, yeah, what on? He said, helping people to kickstart projects. And I said, oh, why are you asking me to do that? And he said, are you kidding? Are you joking? And I thought, oh, yeah, that's fair. So I did this workshop. It was only for an hour. But as I was running it, people would ask questions and I'd say, oh, we haven't got time. We haven't got time. Oh, no, I wish we had more time. Oh, we need to cover, but oh, no, we need to cover that, And I just couldn't get enough into this hour. And now if I run it as a workshop, it's a 3 to 4 hour workshop. It's a lot of, it's intense. But and I said to them, give me your email. Now, this was not a marketing ploy, but I said, give me your email and I'll go home and I'll make up a PDF, with a bit more stuff on it. So I came home and, well, not that day, the next day or whatever, I started writing stuff and typing stuff up. And next thing I know, I've got that many pages of stuff. And I'm like, oh, my God. And I said, I should just turn this into a book. And I was kind of joking with myself. And then I went, actually, why don't I do this in a book? Like, I know how to publish one. I've already done one. And so why don't I just wrap it up and put a cover on it and make it a book? And so I had that book put together in 4 to 6 weeks, something like that. And I sent it to all those people. But if I look back at it now, I think, I probably should have said this instead of that. I probably should have added this. And there's, if I were to go back, I would amend it and build it and that kind of stuff. But then I think, and every now and then that gets to me, but then I think, no, I'm not going to, because there's so many people who have said to me, that book changed my life. I could hear your voice telling me, do this, do that, do that, this is how you've got to do it. And so many people have kickstarted their project because of that book. So I'm not going to change it. I don't want to wreck that kind of raw, I don't know what word I'm looking for, but just that rawness about it. It's just raw, it's basic, it's easy. So there you go. So then suddenly I had two.
Right, but that is a book that you could use to kickstart anything. It's not necessarily just a project. It could be kickstart. Maybe someone wants to start a business. Maybe somebody wants to kickstart something they've always wanted to do. You wrote it in such a way that is there to encourage them to literally get off the bench of whatever sidelines they've been sitting on, that they just need the encouragement to go and get it done.
Yeah. And just to understand it, it's take that first step. Just take that first step. And you never know where it'll lead. And I'm big on that. You don't ever have to plan. I don't have a plan for anything, as you can probably tell. And it always turns out, I always have a vision, and I don't know what the steps are, but I know the first one. I know what I can do today. And then always the next paver appears, and you just step on it. And then the next one will appear, and you just step on it, and you just keep going and readjusting and realigning, and you know what? You eventually get there. So yeah, that's what that book, very helpful.
And then your last book is your gratitude journal, and I'm assuming that you wrote this as a way for you to collect your thoughts and have other people collect their thoughts to not focus on the negative, because it's so easy to live in the darkness, because quite frankly, it's easier there. It takes more effort to focus on the positive, because sometimes the negative is more abundant. So
absolutely.
So the gratitude journal, what inspired you to put this together?
Now, and I'm glad you said put this together, because it's not written. It's not an authorship. It's 100 pages, all the same. It's just like you just repeat. And it's I run a program called Confident Leaders Program, where it goes for 6 months, and I get leaders in, newish leaders in, and I build their confidence, essentially. But I was always having self-care at the end, and we were talking about different ways to self-care. And I thought this year, I'm going to try something different, because it's kind of too late by the time we get there, and it's a bit dumb to just throw it in at the front and talk. It didn't quite fit. So I thought, I'm going to make this journal up. I'm just going to give it to them all, and I'm going to say, so it goes for 6 months. So whatever, I can't even figure out my days. But anyway, that's 30, whatever that is, 180 days. Anyway, whatever. There's at least 100 days in there, even if you miss some, in this 6 months. So I thought, right, I'm going to give everybody a journal, and I'm just going to say, this is going to be our self-care practice, and we're going to start from there. And basically, it's kind of like 3 good things that happened today, 3 things I love, 3 things that I did for others today, 3 ways I took care of. How did I take care of myself today? That kind of stuff. And it's not to be. It's not to perpetuate toxic positivity, and making bullshit up. So I don't agree with that. But what it's for is to say, well, we all have crap days, and that's the way life is, and that's okay. But can we find some good stuff in amongst all the crap? And the more you do this journal, like the more you do these practices of gratitude, it doesn't make your life better. Like there's stuff still there, but it makes your muscle quicker. That it's a much much faster response to correct it. So, oh man, I'm having a crappy day. Oh, you know what? Look at that lemon tree. Isn't it lovely? At least I've got that. That's a really nice thing to look at. How wonderful. Here I am bitching about stuff, and I've got this beautiful lemon tree looking at me. So it's just kind of it makes it faster to see good. So that's my hope anyway. So we'll see. We'll see by the end of the program. I'm finishing up one in September and one in October. So we'll see. I think it's good. Everyone's told me that's great.
Well, I mean, it's better than the alternative. Yeah. Honestly, being mired in the muck is, like I said, is easier to do, but the consequences of that are certainly dire. Absolutely. So doing that, I'll be interested to hear what the results are that you've started with this. I'll be very curious to hear what your class says at the end of this, since this is the first time you've done it. I'll be very curious to see what they say. I'll bet you the results will be very positive, and I'll bet you that this will probably be the best program that you've done because of this journal. So,
and thank you. And I bet also that the results will be invisible. And this is another thing that I think, though, is because it's so subtle, sneaking up on you. It's not a big, profound da-da moment. It's kind of like it's like a daily kind of subtle subtle movement, and I wonder. I'm curious as to whether they'll see the change. I'm seeing the change in all of them. Like I'm seeing this incredible difference in all of the people in the program. But I'm not going to say that's due to the book. It's due to the program, but I'm sure the book's helping.
What I'm so marveled at is that once you had that light bulb moment, you have not wasted a minute, not 1 second of your time, your energy, your thoughts, not one thing. And you just keep looking for areas of, okay, where can I go next? Where can I help next? Where else is there a gap that I can fill? And you don't even, what I think is remarkable and also makes me smile because it is kind of funny. You don't even have a clue what you're doing half the time. You just raise your hand and go, I'll do it. I'll go. I'll figure it out when I get there. That is the best part of this, is that you're like, I'll figure it out. I don't know. But you somehow make it all work. All you are doing is raising your hand and you're like, I see a gap. I'll figure it out. I'll fill it. And that's amazing. You've figured out that time is short. It's the only thing we can't make more of. And it's super precious. And you've just been using every single moment of it that you have to make sure that nobody else wastes theirs either. And I'm just so incredibly appreciative that you and I were introduced, because it's something that has been plaguing me. I think when you hit your mid-50s, that clock starts to gong in your head and go, oh, I've got less time in front of me than I have behind me.
Yep.
And I've got to figure this out. So I'm really appreciative that you and I were introduced, because I have found you fascinating and, quite honestly, very encouraging and inspiring, and make me want to figure out what other gaps can I fill, even if I have no idea what I'm doing.
Don't burn yourself out, though.
Kerryn, you have been a delight being here. I want to make sure that the audience knows where they can reach you and find out more about you. If they want to find out more about your books, your speaking, and where they can find out more about your foundation.
I think the best place is my website. So kerrynvaughan.com. As simple as that. KERRYN. Yes, you do that. Save me. I feel like I'm on the phone to the bank. Yes.
Yeah. No, we don't want to. Yeah. I'll make sure that's in the show notes. And for those of you who've been listening for a while, you know that this is my favorite part of the show, where I get to shut up and stop asking questions. And Kerryn gets to have an intimate moment directly with the audience that you can leave them something inspiring, that just a thought that they can take with them throughout their day, for a moment that you can leave them with something of inspiration that they can just sit with for a moment, that they can contemplate. So the mic is yours.
Wow. Right. Well, now have we got 3 hours? No. There's so many things I could say, but honestly, I just want to keep it simple. Life is too short, and I have lost someone. I'm sure many listeners have lost someone special. We don't know what's around the corner. We're living in a world that it's chaotic, and it's turmoil, and bad's winning over good, and all that kind of stuff. And you know what? We're really great people. Most of the people on this planet are really good people. And if we just back ourselves, and if we just step into who we are, what a difference we could make. And don't waste any time. We're wasting all this time, like putting a lid on our jar, thinking that we're not good enough, thinking that we don't have the capacity. Who am I to do this? And we're all magnificent, unique, incredible human beings, that have just got so much potential and so much capacity. And I'm not saying go try and save the world, because none of us can save the world. But if we just believe we can do more than we are doing, and that doesn't mean go out and spend more of your time, but just show up as you. If you show up as you and take off the mask, forget the crap, forget the trying to fulfill other people's expectations and what I should be, what I shouldn't be. Just be so proud to be you and step into who that really is and just give the world you. And if you do that, you'll use your time more wisely, and the world will you will change the world just by being you, because you're giving other people permission to be them. It's such an important thing. So I think that's enough. That's all. Be you. Life's too short. Get the hell that lid off your jar and get into it. Just live life to the absolute fullest.
I think that is the greatest advice I have heard in a week. So,
in a week.
Kerryn, thank you. In a week. In a week, at least. Kerryn, thank you so much for spending this hour with me and with my audience. I have enjoyed every minute of it. Thank you so much for being here. And for those of you that love podcasts, make sure you check out Kerryn's podcast too, because she also has an amazing podcast. So go check that out. Kerryn, thank you again for being here. I so appreciated it so much. And I want to thank all of you for listening, and we'll see you again next time.
You can't stop me.
That's our show. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. It is my pleasure to be the ambassador of these women's stories. It is my hope that they inspire, that maybe they educate, and above all, that they make you feel like you're not so alone in this big world of ours. I'm hoping that you recognize yourself in these women, and that you feel maybe that you're not so different after all, and that you have lots of company, and that we're all standing together in this arena.
Grind so hard, now it's all in view. Ain't no one that can do what I do. The world's my runway. Watch me slay, can't touch my swag, just watch me play. They used to doubt me, now they scream and cheer. Copy my moves and it's crystal clear. Box me in, so out of this frame. Can't keep up, you're not in my lane. You can't stop me, I'm up too high, can't top me.